Some islands on Earth are dangerous enough to kill you before you reach the shore. Others are sealed by governments, patrolled by armed forces, or defended by people who have never lost a fight. Today, we're ranking 10 of the most forbidden islands on Earth, from dangerous to completely impossible. Number 10, Clipperton Island. Danger level, high. Legal restriction, strict. Survival if you breach it, possible, but ugly. About 1,300 kilometers off the Pacific coast of Mexico floats a small French territory called Clipperton Island. From above, it looks like a near-perfect coral ring surrounding a dark lagoon. Up close, it is one of the most hostile and bizarre places in the Pacific. The island's lagoon is a stagnant, oxygen-depleted pool of brackish water with almost no marine life. The surrounding land is overrun by an estimated 25 million land crabs that swarm everything, and a population of feral pigs that were introduced in the 20th century and became aggressively territorial. The only structure on the island is a rusting Mexican lighthouse. There is no fresh water, no shelter, and no way to call for help. But Clipperton's history is what makes it truly disturbing. In the early 20th century, a small Mexican garrison was stationed here. When the supply ships stopped coming during the Mexican Revolution, the soldiers and their families were stranded. Nearly everyone died of scurvy and disease. The last survivor, a lighthouse keeper named Victoriano Alvarez, declared himself king of the island and subjected the remaining women to years of violence before being killed by one of his victims in 1917. A passing American ship rescued the survivors shortly after. Today, Clipperton is an uninhabited French nature reserve. Access requires a permit from French authorities that is rarely granted. The island has no harbor, no runway, and landing through the surf is genuinely dangerous. French naval vessels patrol the area periodically. Physical danger score, 7 out of 10. Legal restriction, 7 out of 10. The island can be reached, but there is almost no reason any sane person would want to. Number 9, Palmyra Atoll. Danger level, medium-high. Legal restriction, strict. Survival if you breach it, possible if you ignore the history. About 1,600 kilometers south of Hawaii sits Palmyra Atoll, a small cluster of coral islands and lagoons that technically belongs to the United States. It is one of the most remote inhabited, or rather, barely inhabited, places under American jurisdiction. Palmyra has been a U.S. Navy base, a World War II staging post, and a briefly attempted coconut plantation. None of these ventures ended well. The island has a documented history of strange incidents and violent deaths that has earned it a reputation among sailors as genuinely cursed. The most famous case occurred in 1974, when a couple named Mac and Muff Graham sailed to Palmyra on their yacht and were murdered. Their boat was stolen. The killers, another couple who had also anchored at the atoll, were eventually convicted, but the case took years to solve. Muff Graham's remains were found in a sealed aluminum container washed up on the beach. The circumstances were so disturbing that the case became the subject of a book, And the Sea Will Tell. Beyond the history, Palmyra has practical dangers. The surrounding reef is treacherous to navigate. The island contains unexploded World War II ordnance buried in the sand. The remote location means that any emergency is hours from a response. Today, Palmyra is managed by the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service as a nature reserve. Access is restricted to permitted researchers and conservation workers. Unauthorized vessels are turned away. The atoll sits at the center of one of the largest marine protected areas in the world. Physical danger score, 6 out of 10. Legal restriction, 7 out of 10. Beautiful, remote, and carrying a darkness that its clear blue water does nothing to hide. Number 8, Morgan Island. Danger level, high, biological. Legal restriction, total. Survival if you breach it, possible if you avoid a bite. Off the coast of South Carolina, accessible only by boat and invisible from any tourist map, sits Morgan Island. It has no roads, no buildings worth noting, and no human residents. What it does have is approximately 4,000 rhesus macaques living in complete isolation. The monkeys were relocated here in 1979 from a research facility in Puerto Rico following a viral outbreak. They have lived on the island ever since, used for federally funded medical research. The colony is managed by the National Institute of Allergy and Infectious Diseases. The danger is biological and specific. A significant proportion of the macaque population carries the herpes B virus, a pathogen that is harmless in monkeys but frequently fatal in humans if transmitted through a bite or scratch. It attacks the central nervous system. Without immediate treatment, which requires knowing you have been exposed within hours, the infection is often lethal. Several laboratory workers worldwide have died from herpes B infections contracted in controlled research settings. On an island with 4,000 territorial primates and no medical infrastructure, the risk is absolute. U.S. Coast Guard vessels patrol the waters. State and federal law prohibits landing. In 2005, a poacher who landed illegally was bitten by one of the macaques. He survived and was subsequently charged with federal offenses. Physical danger score, 8 out of 10. Legal restriction, 8 out of 10. The island looks peaceful from the water. The 4,000 primates carrying a potentially fatal virus suggest otherwise. Number 7. Ilha de Queimada Grande, Snake Island. Danger level, extreme. Legal restriction, total. Survival if you breach it, unlikely. About 35 kilometers off the coast of São Paulo, Brazil, sits a small forested island that the Brazilian Navy has made it illegal for anyone to visit. The reason is straightforward. The island contains one of the highest concentrations of venomous snakes found anywhere on Earth. Ilha de Queimada Grande is the only natural habitat of the golden lancehead pit viper, a species found nowhere else in the world. Around 11,000 years ago, rising sea levels cut the island off from the mainland. The snakes were trapped. With no ground predators, the population expanded. With only migratory birds as prey, their venom evolved to become extraordinarily fast-acting, up to 5 times more potent than their mainland relatives. A bite causes immediate tissue death, hemorrhaging of internal organs, and kidney failure. Without anti-venom, a human can be dead within an hour. Scientific estimates of the snake population vary, but researchers believe the density is high enough that any movement through the island's vegetation puts you within striking distance at almost every step. The Brazilian Navy enforces the prohibition absolutely. The only permitted visitors are a small number of vetted researchers who must carry anti-venom and wear protective gear. Even they operate under strict time limits. Local fishermen tell a story about a man who landed on the island to pick bananas and was found days later in his boat, dead, his body covered in bites. Another tells of the island's last lighthouse keeper, whose family was killed after snakes entered through the windows of their home. Physical danger score, 9 out of 10. Legal restriction, 9 out of 10. Snake Island is not a place that punishes carelessness. It punishes presence. Number 6, Surtsey Island. Danger level, medium. Legal restriction, total. Survival if you breach it, physically possible, scientifically unforgivable. On November 14th, 1963, a volcanic eruption beneath the ocean south of Iceland broke the surface and kept going. Over the next 4 years, it built an entirely new island from nothing. Scientists named it Surtsey, after the Norse fire giant, and immediately recognized what they had: a completely sterile piece of land where life would have to start from scratch. From that moment, Surtsey became one of the most protected places on Earth, not because it will kill you, but because its scientific value depends entirely on human absence. Researchers have documented every organism that has arrived naturally: bacteria, plants, insects, birds, tracking the precise sequence by which a lifeless rock becomes a living ecosystem. By 2013, 69 plant species had been recorded. Seabirds now nest there, and their droppings are accelerating soil formation. The data being gathered here is irreplaceable and cannot be replicated anywhere else on the planet. The Icelandic government declared Surtsey a protected nature reserve while the volcano was still erupting. Access is limited to a tiny number of approved scientists who must sterilize all equipment and clothing before setting foot on the island to prevent introducing foreign seeds or microbes. The Icelandic Coast Guard patrols the surrounding waters. It is a UNESCO World Heritage Site. In one notable incident, a researcher who relieved himself outdoors on the island inadvertently introduced a tomato plant through the resulting deposit. The plant was immediately removed. The incident was treated as a serious contamination event. Physical danger score, 4 out of 10. Legal restriction, 9 out of 10. Surtsey will not kill you, but visiting it without permission would be one of the most destructive acts of scientific vandalism on the planet. Number 5, Poveglia Island. Danger level, high. Environmental and psychological. Legal restriction, total. Survival if you breach it. Physically, yes. Mentally, visitors are less certain. In the Venetian Lagoon, a short boat ride from one of the most visited cities in the world, sits a small island that the Italian government has kept closed for decades and cannot seem to give away. Poveglia's history is a concentrated record of human suffering. During the bubonic plague, the island was used as a quarantine station. Ships arriving in Venice were ordered to stop here first. Those showing symptoms were taken ashore and left. The dead were burned in enormous pyres along the shoreline. Estimates suggest that over the centuries, more than 100,000 people died on Poveglia. Some accounts claim the soil is still composed partly of human ash. Fishermen in the lagoon have long avoided casting nets near the island. They say they pull up bones. In the early 20th century, a psychiatric hospital was built on the island. Local accounts, some documented, some embedded in folklore, describe a doctor who conducted experimental procedures on patients, including lobotomies, before allegedly throwing himself from the bell tower. The hospital closed in 1968. The island has been empty since. Today, the buildings are structurally dangerous. Collapsing floors, unstable walls, possible asbestos contamination. Venetian police patrol the lagoon, and access without authorization is illegal. The Italian government has attempted to sell or lease the island multiple times. Every attempt has failed. Urban explorers and paranormal investigators have trespassed. Most report the same thing: a quality of silence on Poveglia that is different from ordinary silence. Difficult to describe, impossible to dismiss. Physical danger score, 7 out of 10. Legal restriction, 8 out of 10. Whether you believe in what might linger in places of extreme suffering or not, Poveglia is a place that has absorbed more human pain than almost anywhere else on Earth. Number 4, Bikini Atoll. Danger level, extreme, invisible. Legal restriction, strict. Survival if you breach it. Short term, yes. Long term, the damage is already happening. In the Pacific Ocean, a ring of coral islands curves around a deep blue lagoon. From above, Bikini Atoll looks like paradise. It looked that way in 1946 when the United States chose it as a nuclear testing ground. It still looks that way now. The difference is what the beauty is hiding. Between 1946 and 1958, the United States detonated 23 nuclear weapons at Bikini Atoll. The most significant was the 1954 Castle Bravo test, a hydrogen bomb whose yield was catastrophically miscalculated. Scientists expected 6 megatons. It delivered 15. The explosion vaporized 3 islands, left a crater over 2 kilometers wide in the ocean floor, and spread radioactive fallout across hundreds of miles of Pacific Ocean, contaminating fishing vessels and island communities far beyond the test zone. The native Bikinians had been relocated before the tests began. They were told it would be temporary. It was not. Those who attempted to return in the late 1960s were evacuated again after showing dangerously elevated radiation levels. The reason is cesium-137, which has contaminated the soil and the entire food chain. The isotope mimics potassium and is absorbed by plants. Coconuts, fruit, and crabs grown and caught on the islands are radioactive from within. Eating them causes internal exposure that accumulates silently over time, leading to increased cancer rates, organ damage, and shortened life expectancy. Some carefully managed dive tours now operate at Bikini, exploring the ghost fleet of warships sunk by the tests. The wrecks are extraordinary. The main islands remain off limits. Physical danger score, 8 out of 10. Invisible, but absolute. Legal restriction, 8 out of 10. Bikini Atoll is a paradise that will kill you slowly from the inside without you ever knowing it had begun. Number 3, Vozrojdeniya Island. Danger level, extreme, biological and chemical. Legal restriction, military. Survival if you breach it. Unknown, and that is the problem. In the middle of what was once the Aral Sea sat an island called Vozrojdeniya, Rebirth Island. During the Cold War, the Soviet Union quietly turned it into something the world was never supposed to find out about, an open-air testing facility for biological weapons. The program was known as Aralsk 7. For decades, Soviet scientists weaponized and tested some of the most dangerous pathogens ever created: anthrax, plague, smallpox, tularemia, and brucellosis, on animals brought to the island. The goal was to understand how these agents behaved in the open environment and how effectively they could be deployed as weapons. In 1971, a research vessel passed too close to the island during an active test. A young scientist on board was infected with weaponized smallpox. She survived. 10 people in the city of Aralsk subsequently contracted the disease. 3 died. Soviet authorities contained the outbreak and classified everything. When the Soviet Union collapsed in 1991, the facility was abandoned. Scientists left without decontaminating. Tons of weaponized anthrax spores, buried in pits in 1988, were left in the ground. Then the Aral Sea began to shrink, one of the worst environmental disasters in human history, caused by Soviet irrigation projects diverting the rivers that fed it. By 2001, the water level had dropped so dramatically that Vozrojdeniya was no longer an island. A land bridge connected it to the mainland of Uzbekistan and Kazakhstan. The natural quarantine was gone. In 2002, a US-led operation decontaminated the main anthrax burial sites. But the island is large, the contamination was never fully mapped, and the extent of what remains in the soil is still not known with certainty. The area is now a military-patrolled wasteland, dust-choked and toxic, straddling an international border. Physical danger score, 9 out of 10. Legal restriction, 9 out of 10. Vozrojdenia is a place where the Soviet Union buried its most dangerous secrets, and not all of them have been found. Number 2. Heard Island. Danger level, extreme, geological and environmental. Legal restriction, near total. Survival if you breach it. The island itself will answer that question. Roughly halfway between Madagascar and Antarctica, in one of the most remote stretches of ocean on Earth, sits Heard Island. It is Australian territory in the most technical sense. In every practical sense, it belongs to no one and wants no visitors. The island is dominated by Big Ben, an active stratovolcano whose summit, Mawson Peak, rises to 2,745 meters. Big Ben erupts regularly. Lava flows have been confirmed as recently as 2023, moving down the glacier slopes and into the sea. The island is approximately 80% covered by glaciers that are constantly shifting, cracking, and opening hidden crevasses. The coastline offers no safe landing. It is battered by waves that regularly exceed 10 meters, driven by the roaring 40s and furious 50s. The latitudinal bands where unbroken westerly winds circle the globe with nothing to slow them down. The journey to Heard Island takes a minimum of 2 weeks by sea from the nearest port, crossing some of the most dangerous ocean on the planet. If something goes wrong on the island, a volcanic event, a glacial collapse, a medical emergency, rescue is weeks away. There is no runway, no harbor, no infrastructure of any kind. The Australian government designates Heard Island a strict nature reserve. Permits are almost never issued. Those granted are reserved for major scientific expeditions with extensive logistics and emergency protocols. The ecosystem, penguins, elephant seals, seabirds, has developed in almost complete isolation from human activity, making it one of the most pristine natural environments remaining on Earth. But the government's restrictions are almost secondary. The island enforces its own access policy through geology and weather. It is one of the few places on Earth where the physical environment alone would deter almost anyone, regardless of legal permission. Physical danger score, 10 out of 10. Legal restriction, 9 out of 10. Heard Island does not need armed guards. It has a volcano, a glacier, and an ocean that does the job more effectively than any patrol boat. Number 1. North Sentinel Island. Danger level, lethal, immediate. Legal restriction, absolute. Survival if you breach it. The record speaks for itself. In the Bay of Bengal, surrounded by shallow reef and dense forest, sits a small island roughly the size of Manhattan. There are no military installations here, no radiation, no venomous animals, no volcanic activity. What makes North Sentinel Island the most impossible place to visit on this list, or arguably on Earth, is its people. The Sentinelese have lived on this island for an estimated 50,000 years. They are one of the last truly uncontacted peoples on the planet. We do not know their language. We do not know their social structure, their beliefs, or their history beyond what can be inferred from observation at a distance. We know almost nothing about them. What we know with certainty is this: every attempt at contact has been met with immediate, coordinated, and lethal force. Arrows, spears, warriors positioned on the beach as a warning. The response has been consistent across every documented encounter spanning centuries. The message has never changed. The Indian government established a 5 nautical mile exclusion zone around the island. Entering it is illegal. The waters are periodically patrolled. The law exists for 2 reasons: to protect outsiders from the Sentinelese, and more critically, to protect the Sentinelese from outsiders. The second reason is the more important one. The Sentinelese have lived in isolation long enough to have no immunity to common diseases. Influenza, measles, the common cold, illnesses that most of the world treats as minor inconveniences, could move through their small population with catastrophic speed. A single contact with an infected outsider could trigger an epidemic that wiped out the entire tribe. History has demonstrated this pattern with devastating consistency every time an isolated people has encountered the outside world. In 2006, 2 fishermen whose boat drifted too close to the island during the night were killed. Their bodies were seen from the air but could not be recovered. Recovery attempts were met with immediate hostility. In 2018, An American missionary named John Allen Chow paid local fishermen to ferry him to the island illegally. He had been planning the trip for years. He believed he could make contact and introduce the tribe to Christianity. He approached the island multiple times over several days. On his final approach, he was killed. His body was never recovered. Indian authorities who attempted to retrieve it were driven back by arrows. North Sentinel Island scores a perfect 10 on every measure. Physical danger score, 10 out of 10. Legal restriction, 10 out of 10. Survivability, if you breach it. The historical record gives a clear answer. Every other island on this list is forbidden because of what humans have built, tested, buried, or contaminated. North Sentinel Island is forbidden because of a choice made by its people over thousands of years and enforced every single time someone has tested it. It is the most impossible island on Earth, not because of what it contains, but because of what it has decided to remain. From a Pacific atoll haunted by violence and isolation, to a lagoon island soaked in centuries of plague, to a radioactive paradise and a Cold War biological weapons dump, these 10 islands represent the full spectrum of what makes a place truly impossible to visit. Some are sealed by governments, some by nature, some by radiation that will outlast every country that created it, and one by a people who made their decision about the outside world 50,000 years ago and have never once reconsidered it. The world has been mapped. But mapped does not mean accessible. And for these 10 islands, the gap between the two is everything. If you want to keep exploring the places on Earth that remain genuinely off limits, make sure you are subscribed. And tell us in the comments, which island on this list do you think is the most impossible to visit and why?